This video is about how to paint the foreground of your painting. Now, the foreground is going to be your most detailed part of the painting. It's going to be where all of your textures and your values are most prevalent and at their most vibrant. In this example, you can see all of the details and all of the colors are really bright and vibrant in the foreground, especially in that foreground of the wave. A lot of the textures in this part of the wave are also less blended, and you can see a lot more of the color variation throughout the painting. Here's a much simpler example of a watercolor painting, but you can see that in the background the glacier is less detailed and things get more detailed until it gets to this really nice texture at the very bottom. So these are all pebbles underneath the water. This artist paid special attention to all of those pebbles to make them a little bit larger, which created a really nice texture at the bottom. This student did an especially nice job in separating their foreground from their middle ground and background. So you can see in their painting that they've got kind of that horizon line and some kind of a tree line and a land line. And then it gets a lot larger, so they did a nice job with perspective, and it gets a lot more saturated and darker as you get toward the viewer. So most of your major values and your darker values are going to be located in the foreground of your painting because they're closer to you. You can see them better in detail, and you can see the values and the vibrancy better. Here's another really nice example where the boat you can see is in the foreground. You can see a lot of different values. There's a lot of textures that you can see in all of the items in the boat. You can tell what things are. So this student did a really nice job separating out that foreground using value, using detail, and then using texture as well. Here's my example from this landscape project where you can see the values in the rocks below and the textures become a lot more prevalent, and then they get less detailed as they go further back, maybe a little bit more blended and maybe a little bit more blurry and less vibrant as they get toward the background. This is the painting that you've seen throughout all of the example videos. I've got my reference image and then my painting, and I'm working toward that foreground. So I've got my reference image and I'm looking at all of the detail in the front. So the foreground is going to be my rocks. The background is going to be these trees and that small house. And then as the trees get closer to me, that's probably going to be more my middle ground. And you can see the clear difference in the rocks. So as I get toward the front, my rocks are going to be a lot more large, detailed, and the values are going to be a lot darker as I get toward the front. So to start this, I'm going to have my reference image close and nearby so I can see all of those larger details. And then I'm going to mix up some colors. Now, I'm using a lot of browns on the foreground of my painting, and because they're going to be a lot more vibrant, I'm going to make a variety of them. So I have a medium brown, I've got a dark brown, and I've got this more of a red brown, and that's what I'm going to use to start putting all of those different values in. It doesn't necessarily matter where you start in your foreground. You're going to just pick a spot and start adding in those details. So you're probably at this point adding the second or third layer to your foreground, and you're paying special attention to value and texture. So I'm looking at the rock in the painting and I am increasing all of those values. I am looking at all of the color changes and adding those in where I see them. At this point in my painting, I'm using less water. I don't want all of these rocks to flow together. I want them to be distinct and separate since they are in my foreground. So I'm using a clean brush. I'm making sure that my brush is damp, and I'm not going to use a huge brush because I want to have a lot of control during this time. Since during this time texture is also really important, you can use a variety of those watercolor techniques that we've practiced, so using salt or a sponge or blotting with a paper towel or even just stippling like you can see in this video. I'm stippling texture in, so I'm paying attention to where my textures change from smooth to rough, and I'm just sort of putting that in with my brush, but you can use a variety of tools to actually put all of those different textures in, and that's what makes your foreground more interesting and also stand out more.